hello and welcome to the virtual Romania for the moment. And thank you so much for the interview to talk about, I think it's a masterpiece, this book.
Oh, thank you.
Really, I will tell you why. And I really would like everyone should read this book. It's On Time and Water, and it was translated into Romania at Litera Publishing House. So this is a beautiful book. And as I told you, it's a masterpiece because it is a book which has literature, poetry, science, biology. It could be a memoir. It has everything. So my first question is, how did this fascinating book come to life? What was the starting point?
Well, thank you very much first for the very nice comments.
You're welcome.
This book was about 10 years in the making, actually. So I did a few other books actually while I was writing this book. So the stories come, well, it's of course a longer time because many of the stories are stories that I wanted to tell, like the stories of my grandparents on the glacier, and the story of my uncle that was a crocodile expert, and my grandfather's sister that was the nanny for Tolkien. So some of these family stories I kind of had in my mind that I might want to write about them someday. And then because lots of my older people in my life were alive, I was always recording them. So I was always like turning on the microphone on my phone or some old device, and I was kind of collecting their stories because I knew how valuable it was to have a 80 or 90 or almost 100-year-old grandfather. So then I had been writing about the landscape of Iceland, and I met a climate scientist in Germany, one of the leading climate scientists of the world, and he asked me, why don't you write about this issue? And I said, I don't feel that I have permission to write about it. I don't feel I have a specialty. I don't have a PhD in climate science. I don't feel I have it should not be my role. But he told me that scientific ideas will never spread around the public if it's only carried by scientists. It has to be carried by culture. It has to be interwoven into even music and dance and storytelling, and that's how democracy came by. That's how women's rights came by. That's how all sorts of the issues that we live with today, come through various posts, not just because one scientist said something, and we're all like, oh yes, that's what I think. So that's how the book comes about.
Let's talk a little about you. So in Iceland, you are a well-known bestseller author. You also write for children. You are an environmental activist, and I want to say that you are a former presidential candidate. But your background is literature and poetry. You say about yourself that you are not a specialist in economy or biology or science, but yet you wrote a book about the global warming, about the coral reefs, the permafrost, the laughing gas, all this difficult stuff. And you wrote this book in a friendly way for the people to understand more easily, the dangers the Earth is facing. Do you think this is a more successful way for the people to understand these dangers?
Yes. So just for myself, when this scientist told me this, I could not have. I felt that I felt uncomfortable that I could actually not talk about the issues, because I knew these were the biggest issues in the world. But it didn't feel like they were tangible for me, like the pH of the oceans or the time scale of things or the amount of CO2 coming from humans. So part of the process was actually also just explaining this to myself. So maybe I would read a scientific document like from the United Nations, and I would understand nothing. And it would take almost a week for me to kind of reframe it until I could coin it in a way that I could actually remember what was in the report and understand it and relate it to my own life or my own nation's life or so to write the book, I actually had to educate myself in almost all aspects of climate science, and then of course pick what I thought was, like, if I'm going to tell a story about somebody that drives a car from my house to downtown, you know, there are all sorts of things that happen in the car that I don't have to explain, you know, because because, you know, I don't have to say that what parts were moving in the motor or something. Just tell you that I took the car from A to B.
To B, yeah.
And that's enough information for you, unless you're a mechanic or something really interested in how the motor of this specific car works. So I had to understand it first, and then see how far I could go of without simplifying, just clarifying, you know, what facts make sense to remember and what is just for the specialist to know. So I got great support from leading glacial scientists, ocean scientists, and climate scientists, because they were very supportive. Because I'm from a family of doctors and nurses, and I have a slight kind of scientific background. That is, I went to medicine, but I switched to literature. So I kind of know these. I know natural sciences. I kind of, I'm not afraid of them. But in my family, you know, they don't like when amateurs are writing about what is good for your health. they always say a doctor should write about that. But these scientists, they were saying that people had just not been listening to their graphs and their numbers, and that they really needed art to move their kind of science into people's minds and hearts.
You say in your book that the world is full. It's a world full of chickens, while so many other species have become extinct. And you wonder in the book, what words should we use to talk about the earth? Words to draw words from science, from emotions, from statistics, from where? To talk about this pessimistic but realistic scenario.
Yeah.
What did help you so much to talk for everybody? Because it's a book everybody can understand finally.
Yeah, I thought that was important, and I was actually very happy with kind of when I was getting the first results, that it seemed like even the scientists themselves, because they are always just, you know, if you're a glacial scientist, you're just in glacial science, and you're not thinking about crocodiles or mythology. So actually they started to see their own field in another context than they had been before, and then people that had not known where to start to understand climate issues, they knew something was wrong. But they would sometimes think it was enough to stop buying plastic straws or something. So also for people that just felt they wanted to educate themselves about the issue, they felt they were educated without knowing it, because they were just reading about grandmothers, but suddenly understanding something about glaciers. So I thought, so the book is in a way an experiment to try to talk about something that is too big to talk about. So that's why I ask myself in the book, do you have to be poetic or scientific or practical or mystical? And actually, in the end, I do all of it.
Yes, it's all of that. Yes, that's true.
So I am poetic, and I am practical, and I am scientific, but placed upon science, I place mythology.
Mm-hmm.
So,
since you talk, about mythology, Codex Regius is a good starting point for your stories in the book, because you studied a lot this book when you were younger. It's probably the most important manuscript in Iceland, where we find the poetic Edda. Ragnarök and Valhalla come from this book. Borges and Tolkien inspired from here. What fascinating stories did you find in Codex Regius, the King's Book, that helped you writing this book?
Well, that was when I was invited to interview the Dalai Lama. I was thinking, what can I ask this important person, this holy man that has reincarnated 14 times and is every day being bombarded with wisdom and deep questions. What can I offer, without wasting his time? So in Codex Regius was this bizarre creation myth of the beginning of the world, starting with a frozen cow. And it yes. And it had always been I'd always thought this was a very strange origin story. A frozen cow in the beginning of time, and from the udders of this cow came the 4 rivers that nourish the world, and it never made any sense. But then if you go to the Himalayas, you will find one of the most holy places in India is called Gomukh, and that's a glacier called the mouth of the cow. And suddenly I started to see that, of course, a glacier is a frozen cow, and for almost 1 billion people that live under the Himalayas, this frozen cow or these frozen cows, the glaciers, are the life source for the most bulk of humanity, and these are fragile areas where people maybe don't have many resources to meet hardship or changes in crop so because of global warming, these glaciers are receding. And we could imagine lots of conflict that could come out of water shortage if these glaciers vanish. So mythologically speaking, you could say that this frozen cow is dying, this source of life for millions of people. And that's why suddenly glacial science, that was not like a mainstream scientific thing in the world of science. 50 years ago, when my grandparents were traveling with glacial scientists, suddenly glacial science is becoming fundamental to understand kind of what challenges we will be facing in the next 80 or 100 years, or even now.
It's something, because you speak about your grandparents, it's something that I really adore about this book. All the photos with your grandparents, and there are not simple photos. There are photos which are linked to the topics of the earth you are talking about. So we have very beautiful photos like this one. It's my favorite. We will talk about it. And I was saying that your grandparents, you had 5 grandparents, were very important for you in terms of histories, personal histories, and you incorporate these stories in the stories about the nature. And all your grandparents had so spectacular life, and I would like you to tell us a little about them, because, for instance, Grandpa Bjorn, I guess, was a surgeon, and he met Robert Oppenheimer, for instance. Please tell us about these stories. They are fascinating.
So that aspect is almost like some kind of a Forrest Gump story, because my grandfather Björn, he operated on the Iranian Shah in 1979. So the taking of the embassy in Tehran was a revenge for that operation, and the hostage crisis that came after that. Then he operated on Andy Warhol, that actually died after the operation.
Yeah.
And then he operated on Oppenheimer, the father of the nuclear bomb. So I was always kind of starstruck when grandfather could tell me, because my childhood nightmares came a lot from Oppenheimer, or the invention of the atomic bomb during the Cold War and all that. So I was kind of, I thought it was so interesting that he had actually met, one of the people that created that situation, and his sister, my grandfather Björn's sister, she was Tolkien's nanny.
Yeah.
In 1930. So once I had them both.
There are photos together here.
Yeah. So this is from her family album. So once they sat together in the elderly home and were sharing stories, and I was like, and it was so bizarre to hear these two old people talking about their personal encounters with these historical figures that you would only read about in history books or in the newspapers. So then, but my grandfather left my grandmother in Iceland, so they split. So he had a second life in America, and so his son became one of the leading crocodile experts of the world.
John.
John, and there I could have like a first-hand encounter with a person that is actually saving a species from extinction. And then my grandmother at home, she found another husband, and they became glacial explorers. So there I have first-hand encounters with glacial science and the history of glacial science, and also kind of glaciers in another light than most people see it, because for most people glaciers are something distant, but in my family glaciers are something deeply woven with the family history, and just the love of glaciers is not something everybody is raised with.
They spent the honeymoon out there.
Yeah, they spent 3 weeks as a part of a glacial expedition. So they got married, and the next day they went on a 3-week glacial expedition to measure and map the glacier. And now the place where they were stuck in a snowstorm has the name the bride's belly, the belly of the bride. So that's the 13th highest peak in Iceland that is named after my grandmother's wedding night.
Great. Actually, the sister of your grandpa Björn, artist, I think, I found it interesting, and I would like the readers to know, because her story is very interesting, because she used to sing songs for the children of Tolkien, who hadn't written yet The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And one of the songs, an Icelandic one, was "In the Green Hollow, I hid the ring that was given to me, but where is it now?" For a reader, this is spectacular, because you think, okay, this is the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So the stories are really interesting.
Yeah, thank you. It's I thought that was and the funny thing is that she was at the place where the greatest kind of adventures of the 20th century were written. But she felt like she was missing a party in Iceland in 1930 when we were celebrating 1,000 years of the parliament. So she went home a bit earlier, but she told me that Tolkien had listened to many of her stories, and she could see some of her fingerprints
in the book,
in The Hobbit, which she was writing in the year 1930.
Oh, this is great. The time is very important in this book. we have the title On Time and Weather. Yeah. And the time is very important for you because you have a very interesting point of view of what you call the time of our life. And the conclusion is that me or everybody, we actually live more than we think. And I would like you to explain, because it's such a beautiful explanation. We live more years, 300 years, 400 years. How?
Yes, I was thinking about the time that we can touch with our bare hands, that the time of the people we love. So the time that, so in my case, it would be the time of my grandparents, the time of the people that created my time and I could learn from, and then the time that I create and people learn from me. So in my case, I can, for example, touch with my bare hands 1920, which is around the time of my grandparents. And if my children become as old as my grandmother, they will still be alive in the year 2105, maybe. So then if I have grandchildren, then a person that I will love very much in my life might be alive in the year 2130, even 40. So I can touch, almost 250 years with my bare hands. My daughter, she's so lucky that she knows my grandmother, and she's turning 98 this summer. So my daughter, if that cycle continues of that old age, she might know somebody very well that will still be alive in the year 2160. So my grandmother can tell my daughter a story of her youth, a memory from 1930. And my daughter can tell this grandchild this story, and that memory from 1930 will be in somebody's mind, passed on in the year 2160, perhaps. So the idea is that it's essential to develop long-term thinking and affection for our future generations and responsibility, because we're not interacting with the planet and technology and our short-term habits, today, like that somebody that we really deeply love will be out there living the consequences, either the benefits of our good actions or the consequences of our short-term thinking. So our time is the time of the people that we know and love, that creates us, versus the time of the people that we will know and love, that we create. And every single, and most people can calculate up to 200, from 200 maybe to 260 years of time that they can connect across.
This makes life more beautiful, even.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's because the recent years, maybe we've been detached from generations. We're all segmented into so first the big family was all living together, but now we have been fragmented into individuals, and then from that we're fragmented into target groups, and age groups. So I would be in the target group 40 to 50 or something, and that would be like where I should belong with my thinking. So I wanted to kind of smash these boundaries and this idea of me being different from people 30 to 40. So I just wanted to stretch my connection to my grandmother and then to my offspring, or grandchildren possibly.
You really smash the boundaries, as you said, because at one point you say that, for instance, Iceland is a continuous story of 12 women like grandma, and Jesus actually was born about 21 grandmas ago.
Yes,
so
exactly.
This is very funny as a perception, but this is so true.
Yes, thank you. So I'm just using my grandmother. I'm using my grandmother as a as a measuring stick, as a unit for time. And I can ask her directly, are 100 years a long time or a short time? And she will tell me it's a short time.
It's a short time.
Yeah.
Yes, she said that I feel like I was climbing the glacier yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the glacier in Iceland. It is a glacier named, I hope I say correctly the name. Sorry if I don't. Ökokliot.
Yeah.
Ökokliot.
It's Jökull means glacier, so it's just ok glacier. You can just say okay glacier.
Ökokliot. So actually in 2019, it was declared the first dead glacier, because it was 50 square meters ice cap, and today it's only a 1 square kilometer of dead ice. And it was even an event in Iceland. It was amazing to watch. I watched the images, and people were really crying, seeing the fact that a glacier was declared dead. And I said, okay, not everything is lost. We can be a little optimistic. People do care sometimes, don't they?
Yes, this was so. What is happening is that the glaciers of Iceland, most of them will vanish within the next 100 years. So a single human being born today will witness the loss of most of our glaciers. Only maybe the biggest one will remain for maybe 200 years. So this is a phenomenal change of just the landscape of Iceland, and there were actually anthropologists from Rice University in Texas that noticed this, and they initiated this memorial to be held for the glacier. And then they asked me to write the text for it, for the plaque where it would be set. So this idea was, we did not expect it to get so much coverage, but it ended in the world news. I think it was in most papers in the world, because Reuters made it as one of the major news items of the day. So we wanted to bring this awareness to the people of the world, that because we can't preserve the glacier locally. That is, even though we would stop all the cars in Iceland, we have to stop all the cars in China. Yeah. or stop the at least the gasoline vehicles. So we're in this situation where we can't really preserve Iceland locally. We have to do it only as a collective global event. But
the melting glaciers are not the only problem. You wrote a chapter, and I loved it a lot, about the coral reefs. You were in an expedition, but you were in a lot of expeditions, and you talked about the coral reefs, and I felt like you were describing human beings, really like characters in a book. What precisely impressed you so much in the life of the coral reefs? Not anyone can see what a coral reef looks like and what's its splendor. What fascinated you?
Well, I had never encountered a coral reef myself, so it was hard for me to imagine, what it actually is. I just these Attenborough images, and so it was amazing to encounter it. And first I thought it was some kind of plants, but then you understand these are some kind of animals that build these skeletons around them, and they are also a force of nature, because then they die naturally, and build up these white reefs, coral reefs, and it was a bit I think I was even more sad about that than the glaciers. That is, because a glacier is, after all, it is dead. That is, it is landscape, it is ice, but it does feed life. That is, it does. It is a part of the cycle of water, and and the glaciers are keeping the sea level at stabilizing the sea level. But it's more abstract. But when you go into a coral reef, with that in mind, that we might lose all the coral reefs of the planet during this century, then you feel this you feel this deep, both awe over how beautiful it is, and then this deep responsibility. You also feel a bit like an intruder, because you feel like with your presence, you are part of the problem. That is, you are part of what destroys the reefs. And so I was also, you were also torn by, okay, I'm part of the problem by wanting to see it and actually seeing it, but I felt like I had to kind of tell the story of the reef, because in the climate debate they were always talking about polar bears, but they spoke very little about coral reefs, that which is the most biodiverse part of the world oceans, and because most of the oceans are in a way dead. That is, there's not so much life in the majority of the world oceans. The life of the oceans is very much where the currents are meeting, and where rivers are coming in, and in the shallow waters. But the deep, big kind of center of the Atlantic, there's not so much happening there. So the coral reefs, they are so vital, even though they're a very small part of the oceans. They matter so much for us, and the communities around them, of course.
It's a beautiful story. You write inside, you say, everybody remembers where he or she was when on September 11, for instance, or where I was when Lady D died, but nobody will remember where she or he was when a glacier died or the coral reefs have become extinct.
Yeah, there's a kind of gradual, a kind of gradual ongoing things, and in the end, nobody knows when it actually happened. So that's why we did this monument for the glacier. Was okay.
Yeah.
It's a process, but when did it happen? When did it start? When did it end? So we decided, okay, here's the monument of the first glacier that we lost, and that is a historic moment.
Yeah, it's very interesting because since last year we are all living in a different world ruled by fear. We were afraid of a virus. We are afraid of a virus. And you write in the book, you ask the readers, what if words like global warming and ocean acidification carried the same weight, the same power to terrify as the words nuclear winter, invasion, or indeed virus? Are we doomed not to care, or we are just keep our eyes shut because we say, if I don't see it, it doesn't exist?
I want to be optimistic. And I think that what happened now during the last year, it's annoying for us, of course, that are maybe older, or we for me, from the year 45 to 46 or 47 to 48, it's not a fundamental moment in my life. But if you're 15 to 16 or 17 to 18 or 12 to 13, this will fundamentally mark kind of their world view of how the world can be, how the world can change. And I think those children, they're all born after 2000, while we are all born before 2000. And I saw the year 2000 as a very distant future, like a utopian distant future. And then we're in a culture where we want to stay young as long as possible, because I think my grandparents, they thought it was cool to be very old very soon.
Yeah.
So I remember my grandfather, he was an old man when he was 50, and referred to himself as an old man.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm approaching 50, and I always refer to myself as a young man. And that's maybe some kind of denial. We want to be young. We want to fight age. So that's why we don't really want to admit that the year 2000 was 20 years ago. That's a scary thing.
Yes, that's scary.
So we're.
I know Blade Runner was in what year?
2018 or something, or 19.
Yeah, and then. Yes. Okay.
I think Blade Runner was 2 years ago or something.
2 years ago or something, but it was the future. I mean.
Yeah, it was the future. Yeah. So we've gone past 1984, past 2000, past the future of Back to the Future, and so I think that culturally we're not very. Like culturally, we have not been thinking so much about the future of this century, because we were so focused on 2000, and then. But the children that are now born 2000, they are taking money out of their pension funds. Maybe they even have a summer job, so they're taking out of their pension funds in the year 2070, because I think everybody's supposed to put money into their pension funds. And while my generation just saw that money being used for golf somewhere, hopefully living a good life, going to the Canary Islands or something. This generation sees the climate data, and they just become very pessimistic, which is very normal, because it looks like lots of things will be going wrong in the year 2070.
Yeah.
These children went through, they also witnessed like the Me Too movement, where kind of the culture of a workplace is not defined by the 50 or 60-year-old man. So they also went through kind of social movements of respecting indigenous rights, and then also the 50 or 60-year-old man is not defining the culture or the humor of the workplace. The 30-year-old woman, she decides what's appropriate or not. And then they went through the Corona year, where they sacrificed the best years of their life to save the older generation, and they will. That is because of science, because of medical science. So things that would have been, we always thought economics, especially like liberal modern economics, told us that all sorts of things were not possible. You can't close anything. You can't stop anything.
Mm-hmm.
You can't change anything by law. It has to be done by the market. But suddenly, all tourism, all schools, just everything was just demolished.
Everything stopped.
Everything was just stopped. So this generation that is now in school, they will ask, okay, what's this is the climate data for 2070. Why am I paying into a pension fund if nothing is preparing really the world for this moment? What am I spending the money on?
Yeah.
A lifeboat, or what's happening then? So I think this generation that has seen the economy changed by hand, so certain damaging things just removed in a very short moment, I think this generation will see the economy in a different way than we did. And I think they will demand from the older generation that they just sacrificed their best years. I think they will now demand something from that generation. Okay, what are you gonna do to make my elderly years livable?
Because well, it's the end of the interview of our discussion. I would like to talk in the end about Dalai Lama, just to chill a little, because he's such a luminous person, such a shiny spirit. And I know that you had 2 meetings with him. One was in Iceland and the other was in India, in Nepal, in India. Okay. So what you really learned from this man, who I know he impressed you so much, what meditations on humanity did you find in this person?
Well, I thought it was inspiring that he can actually be light-hearted despite the trouble and the issues, that it's not inappropriate to be light-hearted. It's maybe important and maybe even a survival skill to but at the same time he's not diminishing his cause, or he does not speak badly about his enemy, and he does not support violence, even though he has the power to. If it just says, start fighting, then lots of people might start fighting. And in general, his kind of humanistic approach, and also he also, I thought it was interesting because, of course, Tibet is such a big issue, especially for him. But even he seemed to understand that there's an issue below all issues. That is, so Tibet stands upon something, which is a planet. And if we don't address the planetary crisis and how we interact with our fellow species and the biosphere and our future, then there's very little of free Tibet. There's little value in a Tibet that within an earth that has gone off the rails. So even he could see that even though he was fighting very much for his core issue, I think he could understand that the global aspect is as important for the future of Tibet, and also because global warming changes that landscape more than many places, because it warms more on average than other places, and they have the melting glaciers there. As they
the permafrost, you wrote about this, I guess.
Yeah, both the
Alaska and also
and the glaciers.
And the glaciers, yeah. So in the end, are you a little optimistic about this planet? A little.
Yeah, I wouldn't have finished the book if I wasn't if I wasn't hopeful that we could do something. And I was actually, but my optimism is not based on just a gut feeling. Scientists have told me that these issues are something that we can address within the technology that we have, within the social structures that we have, or within that all the solutions are known, and it is possible to address them all, and within, but we have to rethink lots of political and social and commercial structures, but it's all possible. And I think if we know that the planet itself is at stake, that we will start to see that there are things that are bigger than brands, and so I'm optimistic.
And more than commercial sales to China, as Mike Pompeo said that if I know it was something about the melting of Arctic. He said, "Oh, this is a good commercial sailing way to China."
Exactly. Yeah. There's more to the earth than that.
Yeah. So thank you very much. I would really love you to come to Romania and to speak to some students I mean, you have a very beautiful speech. I will send you a message in a bottle, and probably I will be lucky like the Englishman did. You know the story. So thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you.